If you've ever PCSed, you already know it's stressful, it's fast, and the decisions you make during those first few weeks can either build long-term wealth or cost you thousands. So tonight we're cutting through the confusion. Whether you're heading to your first duty station or your fifth, we're breaking down exactly how to make your PCS move smoother, smarter, and more financially secure, especially if you're thinking about using your VA loan. So if you're wondering, should you buy or rent? Can you keep your current home with a VA mortgage? What if you need to move again in 2 years? You're in the right place. We're going to cover all of that. So make sure you stick around, because by the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly how to make your PCS a smooth, stress-free step on your path to building long-term wealth. And most importantly, I have the right two guests for us tonight. I know VA loans very well, but I am not a veteran, so I don't know this PCS process. So I am joined by Gabe Veal, a mortgage expert and U.S. Air Force veteran out of Colorado, and Alexis Brown in Memphis, Tennessee, a Navy wife. So they know everything that you need to know about PCSing, and we're going to jump into it. So Alexis, why don't we start with just the very first thing you should do? You need to get organized. So if I say, hey, you just got orders and you need to move and you need to get organized, what does that mean?
Well, after the initial freak out, because I'm assuming these orders came when they should, right? On time and not last minute, is to start exploring options at the new duty station and talk to, well, what I would do is I'm going to talk to my spouse. What are we going to do there? Housing? Are we renting? Are we buying? Right? What are we going to do? Where are we going to live? And then from there, start exploring options, focusing on schools, trying to connect with spouse groups, that sort of stuff. That's the very first thing I'm going to do.
And Gay, on the mortgage side, what are your thoughts when someone calls and they're in the panic? Hey, we got to move and we're thinking about buying.
Yeah, so there's a lot to consider here. Like, do you own a home at your existing duty station? What are you going to do with that? What's your existing entitlement look like? You know, do you need your entitlement restored? There's just a ton, but it's super important to reach out to a mortgage professional if you're going to be buying at your next duty station as soon as you find out that you've been selected for reassignment, so you can start working on all of the things that you need to do, collecting all those key documents you need, prior to the move, to make sure that you're ready to go. And that you know what you really can do, can you even buy another home? Is that something that is in the cards for you, based on your current situation at your existing duty station?
So this is actually a really good spot. So this show you're probably watching on YouTube. You may be in the Vetted VA group, but Vetted VA is a very large Facebook group, also a website, vettedva.com, where you can get connected with professionals that are truly experts on the mortgage and real estate side in using your VA benefits. So if you're watching this and you need to get connected with someone, go to the Facebook group, Vetted VA, go to vettedva.com. There's a map that you can find professionals in your area, because really this get organized thing, a lot of times when I say, hey, you need to get organized, people are, I don't even know what that means. And that is where your professionals can come in handy. You need a mortgage professional that is not just educated in loans, but is educated in VA loans, and especially VA loans for active duty. What I will say, I know VA loans really, really well, but I was never in the military. And prior to joining Vetted VA, I didn't have that level of experience of knowing what this process looks like. How are we looking up what the new housing allowance is in the new area? What is a pay rate? All of these things that are super important. So you are looking for a subset of a subset. So there are a lot of loan officers in the United States. Most of them are not very good. Of the ones that are good, many of them don't have that level of knowledge and expertise that you want and need on VA loans. And same thing with the real estate side. The real estate, Alexis, maybe you fill in the blanks here, but like I say, any realtor can sell a veteran a house using the financing. And if they have an expert loan officer on the side, there's not a lot that can go wrong. But you're not going to have that expert guidance and insight. So especially with that focus on the PCS process, what is the role of a realtor that is not just an expert realtor, but really knows the VA loan and the military lifestyle?
Well, I would off the top make sure that they've either PCSed multiple times, or they've worked with a lot of people relocating or PCSing in, right? But also, a real estate professional needs to understand your timeline. Depending on the branch and the tour, you might only be somewhere 12 to 36 months, right? um, the market for a lot of places across the country has shifted. It's not what it was. I know, Josh, we did a show like this a couple of years ago. It's a different market, and you really need to understand the pulse of the market. Make sure that you're relying on the professional and you fact check them on data. Are the areas that you're interested purchasing in, are the areas that can support the current price? There should be data showing a trend. Is the neighborhood currently trending down, or the town? Also, make sure that we all know with military life, you're here today, but orders could pop tomorrow and it's time to roll, right? So make sure that if you find yourself in a situation where life happens or your orders are cut short and you don't have enough equity in the house to sell, that at least the neighborhood is able to support rental, right? That equals your mortgage amount. So, I mean, always, those are good hitters, kind of like to put people out. I don't want to overkill you guys with too much info on it. But yeah, you better vet them.
Yeah, it is absolutely, it is essential that you have people that understand this, because again, an expert realtor who isn't familiar with the military and even the VA financing could advise you what is good advice for a standard buyer who can plan on a 5 to 7 year timeline. You don't necessarily have that luxury.
Yeah.
So we are going to take this conversation in a couple of different directions. But let's start with this. Before I jump into, okay, you've decided to buy, what does buying look like and what ducks do we have to have in a row? Gay, what is the conversation look like when someone reaches out to you? This isn't just a standard, hey, I'm thinking I might want to buy, but I could rent. Should I rent or buy? It's a very different conversation when you're having that conversation with a veteran who may be moved repeatedly. So how does that conversation look when you're going through that? And feel free to jump in, Alexis. Either way, what are you guys advising a veteran who is getting orders and getting moved to a new area in terms of deciding whether they should rent or look to buy in that new area?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Alexis touched on it when she said, like if you're, you got to assess what your current situation is. If you own, are you going to sell? Do you have enough equity to sell? Have you been in the home long enough? I'm really sorry, by the way, my dog has a squeaky toy in the room. So if you guys can hear that, I apologize. Stop it, please. Anyway, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So if you have a home and you need to know, like, are you going to sell it? Are you going to rent it? What does renting it look like? Like, the great news is that the VA's got some, really great guidelines that allow you to offset the rent, the existing mortgage with projected rents. That's a very favorable, usually a very favorable calculation. So if that's something that you feel like you can manage, that's often a great plan. But then you would have to look at existing entitlement. Like, do you have enough entitlement remaining? Where are you going? Are you going to a place where you're going to have a lot of extra entitlement that you didn't realize? I'll give you a perfect example. Places like Alaska, Hawaii, Northern Virginia, little pockets in the continental United States have these higher loan limits that extends your bonus entitlement if you're moving to those areas, not from those areas, but to those areas. And so those are the types of conversations that I'm going to be having with clients, potential prospective clients about, what it looks like for if they're going to rent or buy at the next duty station. Really we're looking at, like, can you, first of all, and what does that look like for your overall, financial situation at the next duty station.
So that, I mean, I whoa, that was aggressive.
I'm gonna close the door now. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
So when I sit here and think in terms of this, where do we even start this thought? Say, okay, I know I'm being moved. And so now I got to decide, am I going to buy or am I going to rent? What do the numbers look like? So first of all, you have to have the interest in buying. right? If you just say, hey,
For
that's
sure.
that's not me. I just want to rent. I get moved a lot, so I'm going to deal with this. But then we have to run through the numbers of what that looks like. So Alexis, how do you work through it? So you have a lot of mortgage knowledge, so you can fill in a lot of that gap. But how do you start that conversation, and what should that conversation look like with the veteran saying, "Hey, I'm open to buying," but how do they figure out what are the price points for things that they would be happy with in an area they maybe haven't been to? If they do get moved again in 2 or 3 years, what do the rents look like? So what does that impact them? Are they going to be able to cover the mortgage with prices high and rates still a little bit high and affordability stretched? So what does that conversation look like when you're helping someone to decide, does it even make sense to get pre-approved and start looking at houses?
Right. So I always lead in with affordability, right? Making sure that it's, if you are considering buying, that you understand fully your options. What are your options before you really jump in and just decide? I always feel that when you're PCSing, you kind of feel like you're out of control of your life, and it's important to try to find portions that you can be in control. And you could be in control of a decision should you rent or buy, definitely, right? And work with professionals who could give you all options. So for me, as a real estate agent, not a loan professional, I encourage potential purchasers to establish what their comfortable monthly budget looks like, right? Oftentimes lenders will, especially national lenders that a lot of us bank with, they will pre-approve you for your max amount. And that's great if you're in a duty station like San Diego or Colorado Springs, DC, the DMV area, places like that, because you need that. But if you're coming to a smaller installation area or something a little bit less expensive, then it's important to understand what are you comfortable paying, right? So I kind of have that conversation. In my area, a lot of people I work with like to stay within BAH. So when you're going between different BAH stations, like what Gay talked about, you could be coming from a higher, like the DMV area, San Francisco, Seattle, those areas, Southern California, you're going to have very high BAH. You're coming to Memphis, Tennessee. Hello. No, right? It's cheap here, right? And real estate's not necessarily as cheap as people think. So understanding your buying power and focusing on the price point that you're comfortable with. Now, also with that, when we're talking about projecting for the future, I don't want to start talking too much, but when you're getting pre-approved, and let's say it's a number you're comfortable with, remember, we can't predict the future. You're going to want to make sure that your mortgage isn't going to be so high over BAH or so high over rental area that you could easily find yourself in a hole, right? Especially if you find yourself having to rent. Most military service members and families want to rent to fellow military families, right? And something that you're willing to pay when you own a home is a lot different than what someone's willing to pay when they rent. So also understanding that, if that makes sense. I think it does.
No,
Josh,
100%.
yeah, can I also just add in, and I think we touched on this just a little bit, but just to let's talk about what do we use, right, for pay when you get to the next duty station, or when you're at the current duty station, you're not at the next one yet, but you're buying at the next duty station. So the way that works is, first of all, you have to have orders. That's the first thing the lender is going to ask for. They are going to want proof that you are moving to that new duty station. And the reason why is because we're going to use your income, pay, and allowances for the new duty location. So if you're going to be doing a special duty there, that you're going to get some sort of special duty pay, we'll use that, but we need documentation of it. If you're moving to a place, again, I'll use Alaska and Hawaii as a perfect example. Both of those locations get COLA, or cost of living allowances. We'll be using that as well. And so it's important to know which pay we're going to be using. And kind of have that, and what allowances. So we'll be using BAH from the new location, and any other pay and allowances from the new location, not from the existing location. So that's important. And then also, like, how long are you going to be there, right? Like, not everybody gets assignments that, maybe you're going for like training en route or something like that. And so you may not be there long enough to, where it makes sense to buy a house. So,
Make rank, if you make rank.
Right. Exactly. All of those things. The other thing too is like if you're PCSing around this time of year, usually there is a change in at the beginning of the year of the conforming loan limits, which is what's used to determine the calculation for bonus entitlement. So your bonus entitlement, if you close on a home all the way up through the 31st of December, is going to be different more than likely. It's not always guaranteed to change, but more than likely it will change, and it will be to your advantage to wait until after the first of the year. So that's another important thing to consider as far as timelines go.
Because in the mortgage industry, what it started 3 or 4 years ago, most investors jump the gun. They project what that number is going to look like and start doing those loans earlier in the year. But with the entitlement, that's not going to happen until January 1. So you as a VA loan versus the person, hey, I needed 10,000 extra on to be a conforming conventional loan or not be high balance if they're in a high cost area. We don't have that benefit. You're gonna have to wait if you need that. A thought that I like to include here, and I'd love for you guys to weigh in on it. You have to think a little bit more like an investor in terms of what could happen, even though my plan is not necessarily to become a landlord or acquire multiple properties. Because you are less in control of your location than a civilian, you got to sit here and say, well, what would happen if 2 years from now I end up being a landlord? Because most of our veteran buyers are doing 0 down, maybe 5% down. So it's a minimum down type transaction. We've transitioned out of the market for most of the country where you're not looking at 5, 7, 10% annual appreciation, where you can say, hey, 2 years down the line, I'm going to have 15 or 20% equity and I can do whatever I want. And especially active duty, a lot of retired veterans are exempt from a funding fee. Most active duty, you're going to be paying that funding fee. So all of these things need to come into it. So you have to look forward and say, what would it look like? As you guys talked about, what would someone rent this from me before if I had to move? How much equity am I likely to build up if we get 1 or 2% appreciation? What does it look like if that value dips a lot? So Alexis has rightly pointed out, we don't have a crystal ball. No one knows what it's going to look like 2, 3, 5 years down the line. But when we're talking to civilians, I say, can you commit to 5 to 7 years in this property? Well, it's just a different conversation here. So you want to go through all of the possibilities, all of the potential outcomes of that crystal ball and make a plan there. One of the things that we had talked about as we were kind of planning and prepping here for the show, that has been helpful for people who may be somewhere for a shorter time frame, is the use of buy downs and seller credits to use less cash to get into a property or to keep that payment minimal for a few years. What are some of the pros and cons of that? As a realtor, Alexis, when you're structuring deals for active duty, what are you looking at and what are you considering when you're asking for seller concessions? And again, this is a very, very different conversation. 4 years ago, people, seller concession, what the hell is that? Nobody knows. Now it is a reality when a lot of parts we can say, do we want to negotiate on price? Do we want to negotiate on terms? Do we want to get a buy down? A lot of things there that you can do. How do you walk buyers through that?
Well, depends on how long that house has been sitting on the market. You got to shoot your shot. The last couple of deals I've done, I've gone in as hard as we can go, see if we could pay down debt. No doesn't hurt. Definitely find an agent where no doesn't hurt them either, right? So I like to just see what we can do. The best we can make it. If the house has been sitting 120 days, is that seller serious? Is that seller serious about selling? I know as a real estate agent, I'm going to go back and look how long ago did they purchase, see if they have a second mortgage, right? If it looks like they're sitting on a couple $100,000, then let's shoot our shot. That's it. This is going to be as high as the lender says we can go. So whatever the buyer's needs are. What I have found, the longer the home sits, the more opportunity. There you go.
Well, let's go a step further. Let's say a $400,000 house, and the seller says, "Hey, I want to move this thing. I'll give you $15,000."
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple things we can do with that. If they're willing to give us $15,000, we could cut the price. Say, "Cool, I only want to pay $385." Mm-hmm. We can use it to pay the funding fee if you're subject to the funding fee. We can use it to pay closing costs. We can use it to a buy down. Gay, when you're kind of going through all those options with an active duty buyer, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah. So first, let me just say this. I'm surprised at how often when a contract is written that the concessions they try to allocate them to something. Don't allocate them to anything. Like just give the lender the most flexibility as possible to do with those concessions what's best for the buyer. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a contract recently and it said $6,000 credit for carpet. And so I sent it back and I said, no, we can't do that. Just make it a generic seller concession, please. The buyers will buy carpet with it if that's what they want to do, right? Like, you know that your carpet needs to be replaced. Just give me a generic concession. And so, not only did I have, this is another thing too, that you may find with rates right now, that I'll just lump this all into the same conversation because they act similar, not always exactly the same, but similar, is you could also get lender credits. And so this particular one, they changed it. I got 6,000 in seller concessions. They gave 6,000 in seller concessions, but I also had 6,000 in lender credits, which is great. I'm sorry, I paused for dramatic effect. That is, that's like crazy, right? And it was a great rate too. So like, it was crazy. The timing was impeccable. So we had all of these seller concessions. And so I'll just say, not just seller and lender concessions together. So there are so many different ways to structure those concessions. You can do a permanent buy down. You can do a temporary buy down where the loan amount, the mortgage payment is lower for 1, 2, or 3 years, and then it returns to the original note rate, which is different than an adjustable rate mortgage. Completely different. A lot of people think they're the same, but that's very, very different. It is a fixed rate mortgage. It's just temporarily lower by using those seller concessions to offset the payment. You can use it for that cash to close. And my favorite thing on a VA loan, they can't do on any other loan, is you can use it to pay off debt. I love it. Like, let's pay off that high rate interest or high interest rate credit card, or maybe even a car note, depending on how much, that's costing you per month, or whatever the interest rate you have on that. So there's so many different ways to structure those seller concessions. And I'm going to have a conversation with a client and find out, with the buyer, what do they need the most? Do they need cash back at closing? Like, do they need their earnest money back at closing so they have cash dollars to do something with? Do they want to make debt go away so that they're lower, or so that their overall outgoing payments every month is lower? Do they, do they want just a lower payment for a few years? Like, there's so many different ways to structure it. Honestly, like, I can't even cover all the options.
You said the most important thing is what is most important to that buyer, because
100%.
all of the options that you talked about, those are all good things, right? But they're
Yes.
not right for everyone, right?
Right.
In different scenarios, different situations. What do you value? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So there are loan officers, there are people online that are a little Dave Ramsey-ish, which Dave is great, but he's very dogmatic. Everyone do this, one size fits all. And that's not the right answer.
Correct.
The right answer is to work with professionals that know all of those options. And you guys would be shocked at how few loan officers know the VA loan to know you can pay off debt. All of the things that we just talked about. Some of them will tell you, hey, 4% max seller concessions, which that's what the guideline reads. But if you don't understand what that really means, you can pay a lot more than 4%. So different things to different people, knowing what is important to you. So we've been focusing here on buyers. So you're getting PCS'd out. We're going to go buy a house. What if you already own a house and you need to sell? Alexis, what does that conversation look like, and how does that different for someone who has a hard deadline? I got to be out of town. I got to be at my new duty station, and I don't want to own this home any longer. So what special issues does that bring up that you need to be aware of if you are a homeowner and PCSing out of your current duty station?
I got it, but I have to say something first, Josh, and that is on what Gay said, is also you can ask the seller to pay your funding fee.
Yeah.
Mhm. And if you're in a state that's non-community property, like my state, if your spouse is a veteran and at least 10% disabled, use their entitlement because then you don't have that funding fee. Right. Some people think that the spouse isn't working. Oh, or she only did or he or she only did 4 years. Oh, let's not. But you can also do that. But back to what you said, Josh. All right. So what's
I appreciate you circling back to the actual question.
yeah. So what's it look like when it's time to sell? Well, I think you need to talk to a real estate professional depending on how your market is, and how your market is. Everyone is paying attention to homes sitting on their street, to people at their command who are PCSing. They know how the temperament of the market is in their area. If you don't, talk to a real estate agent. But let's assume you kind of know stuff's a little slow or it's moving fast. If you're in a market where it's moving a little slow, you need to talk to a real estate agent quickly. Right now, it's November. For the last month, I've been taking care of exterior photos for my clients that are PCSing in February and March, because here in Memphis, like our leaves already turned, right? So we're trying to get the house ready to be in the best position we can for that spring market because the market's lagging. But you're definitely going to want to talk to a real estate professional and just explore what are your options. Now, considering how long you've owned, you might be sitting on a great rate. Assumptions are still a great possibility. You're still able to move your home relatively fast if you're sitting on an assumption. Discuss that with your real estate agent, but also fact check them and talk to the loan servicer. The loan servicer is who you're paying your monthly mortgage to. That's your loan servicer, not necessarily the loan officer you worked with, but the one you're paying, right? Monthly. So run that by them. The sooner, if homes are sitting in your market, let's say 90 to 180 days, right? You're going to want to talk to that real estate agent early to talk about, what does this look like? What's a good timeline? How long do we let it sit before we start talking about the R word? The R word is rent. What does that look like? Interview a real estate agent who perhaps is also a property manager. If you find yourself in that situation, you constantly have to have a backup for a backup. Because when you're PCSing, no one's going to care that you have a house at your last duty station you can't sell. That's a you problem. You got to report when you have to report by, right? And for most, everybody wants to try to keep the family together, not keep the spouse in one location and the service member goes on to the next duty station. So just talking through with a professional, one that you have a good relationship with and that you can build trust with, and just have a plan. I mean, that's what this is, right, Gay? You just got to have a plan for a plan. Backup.
Yeah, I mean, and it, listen, it definitely can add to the stress of a PCS. I mean, Alexis and I know we've both PCS multiple times, and know how stressful it can be. Just the move by itself. I mean, there's a lot going on. You're probably changing jobs. Your spouse may be changing jobs. Your kids are changing schools. There's a lot going on besides just the home decision, which is why it's just so important to enlist a really good team, both on the outgoing side and on the incoming side, to help you with those decisions. And it's important to have someone that's not, that's not going to try to talk you into buying because it helps their pocketbook, right? If buying is not right for you, you want to make sure you have a team that's saying like, hey, all the things that you're telling me that's important, it sounds like buying may not be right for you right now.
That's right.
Yeah. And when we look at this, I say it is important that you have experts on your side that are advisors. They're not expert salespeople, because there's great realtors that are great salespeople. There's great loan officers that are great salespeople, but they're not advisors. They're not there to advise you. And some of that is volume of business. I mean, honestly, there are realtors and lenders that live paycheck to paycheck. And if their next paycheck and paying their rent or mortgage next month involves talking you into buying, that's not necessarily neutral advice. So you want someone that has expertise, that is willing to advise you, that does a volume of business, and not just general expertise specific to using your VA benefits. So with that, before we move on to kind of just a little recap of any common mistakes or things that we would want to avoid during that PCS process, anything that either of you feel like we've left out in terms of buying or selling or deciding to buy or rent when moving to a new duty station?
I'll add one thing, and I'm really just bringing it up because it just happened. Like, it was just a scenario that I had. And it really kind of comes back to like knowing who you're working with. And Alexis alluded to this earlier, when you're working sometimes with these national lenders that you bank with. And it may feel like they know what they're talking about when it comes to the VA loan, because words like Navy or USA or veteran or something like that are in the name of the company. But there's a gentleman that just retired, and he moved to Tennessee, actually. And he's looking to buy in Tennessee. And he had kind of made this assumption after he talked to one of those lenders that I just mentioned along those lines. And they told, and he was interested in possibly buying a fourplex, but what they told him was that he had to start conventional and then live in the home for a couple of years so he could get rental history, and then he could convert it to a VA loan. And I was just like, what did they tell you? And so, I'll just throw this out there. You can buy a multi-unit home, even like at a next duty station or something, as long as you live in one of the units. Yeah, like that's the number one rule of a VA loan, is you have to occupy the property when you're purchasing, right? Is like it has to be purchased as a primary residence because you're going to occupy it. But so like you can do that with the multifamily as well. So I'll just throw that out there because there's a lot of bad information floating around, not necessarily related to PCSing. But definitely just kind of goes along those lines of, man, just make sure that, you're working with someone who truly knows what they're talking about when it comes to the VA loan and how it works.
Same goes for land. Some of those national lenders will cut you off, say 10 acres. No. I've sold houses on 80 acres with a VA.
Yep.
200-year-old farmhouses, you can do it. So when they start saying, no, the VA can't. Also, just because their name has veteran in it or VA or their team has VA doesn't mean they work for the VA. How about that, gay? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. No. No. So triple check and double check.
I want to underline that with the trust but verify. You've got to. If you get told no, that's fine. The answer may be no, right? The answer sometimes is no. But if someone tells you no, you can't do that, talk to someone else. Use the map, use the vetted VA map, find a lender or a realtor in your area and say, hey, I was told this. Is that accurate? Am I really not allowed to do that? Right. So a question here. Claudia, one of our pros here, says, for the rentals, is there a specific amount of time I need to live in it before I can rent it out on a single home? So you're getting PCS'd out. I bought 2 years ago, and I signed an occupancy affidavit. It says I'm going to live in this as my owner-occupied residence, because VA loans are for buying your primary residence. How long, Gay, do you got to stay there before you can rent the property out?
So there isn't a specific amount of time. You can rent out your home pretty much, whenever you want. Now, when you first sign your paperwork, when you buy the loan, there is it's called the VA counseling, military counseling checklist or something like that. Help me out there, Josh. Do you know what it's called?
I don't.
You know what I'm talking about? It's like the very first page of like your disclosures and everything. And that's the only place that it mentions that you intend to occupy the home for at least 1 year. So, the VA wants you optimally to occupy the home for a year, but the fact of the matter is there is no hard, fast written requirement for you to do that. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a gentleman who had orders to Langley, Virginia. This was like February. He was having a new build, built, went under contract for that. Home was going to be ready in March. Like about 3 weeks before he's supposed to PCS, the government said, just kidding. We're not going to send you there yet. We're going to send you on this extended 10-month deployment first. We're going to bring you back to your duty station. Then we're going to PCS you there. So his PCS to Virginia stayed, but it was like 10 months down the road. So we're like, okay, what's this guy going to do? He's about to close on this home and he's not even going to be able to live there. He's not even going to be getting BAH for there, right? Like any of that. And so we called the VA and the VA's like, Yeah, I mean that happens. That's the government, right? Like you don't have any control over that. The intent was to occupy. You had proof that the intent was to occupy, and they allowed him to essentially rent it out immediately. And then, as soon as he got there, he not as soon as, because he signed a 1-year lease with someone, but a couple of months after he got there, then he moved in. So anyway, that's a long way to say there's no specific amount of time. What I will tell you is this, is if you want to offset with projected rents without requiring 2 years of rental income shown on your tax returns, it has to be a departing residence. So you have to have immediately lived in it prior to you renting it out. So Claudia, great question. I'm not sure if that answered, I kind of gave 2 different answers there, but hopefully one of those answered your question.
And that question comes up all the time. I have some veterans that signed today, husband and wife, and like the first thing they ask, and they probably ask like 3 times through the process, well, do we have to live here forever? What if we want it to be a rental? Like it is okay. You can convert it to a rental. You are not saying I'm going to live the rest of my natural life in this house. You are saying I intend to move into this and occupy it as my primary residence. Things change. There's no occupancy police. And largely, if you want to know, am I doing the right thing? What is my intent? If your intent is not to move into the property, do not try to use your VA benefit to buy that property. But as long as you're intending to move in, life can change. Things can take you in a different direction, and you are able to rent that out. So with that, why don't we roll through a couple of the common mistakes. I'll go back to this, that it is a part of where we started with. We started with get organized and find your pros. But one of the biggest mistakes is just waiting too long to start. Like, you have a finish line, whereas a normal buyer, I can put it off, I can do whatever I want, and maybe I do it in the spring, maybe I do it next year. You have a finite timeline here, and especially if you have a property to sell, there's just a million things going on here. So once you are getting relocated, let's start that process. Another one here that I think we've hit on really well is just assuming that every lender and every realtor really understand your VA benefit and how you can use that. So for me, those are the 2 biggest ones. Alexis, for you, what are the big mistakes that you could see someone making that come up often?
Not understanding the area. That's the biggest issue. Relying sometimes on buddies. Just what works for your buddy's family is not going to work for your family necessarily. Fact checking professionals, making sure that the school zone you are zoned for is in fact where you're buying or renting. That's a big mistake. Understanding it when you first speak to a real estate professional, ask them, hey, what is something I need to know about that state? Because you're coming from different states. Some states require certain things in their disclosures, other states do not. Ask about HOAs. That could really, really, really come back and bite military families, especially in states like mine. Here in Tennessee, we do not have to disclose up front and supply HOA bylaws, which can harm you later if they don't allow rentals. And shockingly, they don't allow military clauses. Okay. So those sort of things. Check, register sex offenders. Just make sure your family is taken care of. And you really have to vet professionals. You just have to shoot it to them straight. Hey, I don't know what I don't know. Tell me what I need to know. There you go.
And along that same couple that she's texting me right now, they signed their docs earlier today, and say, I knew going in, she and her husband were nervous. This is the first time they've done it. They had a million questions. And if you ever feel like someone doesn't have the patience for you and doesn't have the time for you and doesn't want to explain things to you, just move on. Like, did I want to I've probably spent 3 hours on the phone with her throughout the process. And that's not common. Maybe an hour and a half of walkthroughs. So 2 to 3 times what I normally do, but none of them were bad questions. None of them were crazy. And that was what she needed to have a comfort level. And you guys will not be shocked to know she had talked to about 7 different lenders, including 2 of those major national call centers. And none of them took the time to make things make sense to her. And one of them was a local lender who specialized in VA loans. And I looked at it, closes a lot of VA loans, and from everything I could see, understood the process because it wasn't an easy, simple loan, but just sent out disclosures, didn't have time to review them, didn't want to text me over your questions and I'll get back to you. That type of stuff is not acceptable for anyone, for any buyer, any borrower, whether it's your realtor or your lender. You're never going to be an expert in this. We do this every day. You don't. So there's no dumb questions. There's no question too repeated. No question too simple. Someone should always be willing and able to walk you through all that. So let's throw that as a mistake of dealing with people who don't have the time and patience for you that you need. Gay, any common mistakes that you see or any things you want to make sure that we're helping folks avoid?
Yeah. So I would say, for me, some of the biggest things that I see when it comes to PCS also applies to people who are separating. And I know that's not really what we're talking about here, but a separation can kind of sneak up on you. And when you're within 12 months of separation, now we're not looking at your active duty pay at all. So you may be getting ready to do your final PCS, right? Your final move home, you've just separated or something like that. And so we're not using your active duty income anymore. Even though you know that you're probably going to get some sort of disability rating, we can't project that. And if it hasn't started, we're not using it. And also we don't know like what percentage it's going to be. Another thing that I see happen a lot is it's something that I mentioned earlier, but I talked really only about the active duty side of the house, but it applies to the spouse side as well. So when you're PCSing, we're using the future duty stations, pay and entitlements, but that also applies to the spouse. So if the spouse has a job, the first thing we're going to ask is their job remote? Are they keeping it? Or do they have to give that job up? And if the latter is the case, do they have a new job? Do they have a job offer letter? What does it look like? When does the job start? What's the pay structure? Things like that, because it will greatly determine whether or not we can use that income. So those types of things I see, creep up a lot. And then, back to the rental. I know I mentioned this a couple of times already, but if you're, and I see this happen most common with mill-to-mill couples because both have VA loan entitlement. And so it's easier to get more properties as you go throughout your career because you have more entitlement to use. And so maybe you'll have duty station A will have a property, duty station B will have a property. Now you're getting ready to move to duty station C. And if you have not been renting out duty station A long enough, that's not your departing residence anymore. If you don't have 2 years of taxes, now I can't count any income from that rental. And so there are some very important timelines that, again, a inexperienced loan officer or somebody who doesn't really understand the nuances of VA guidelines may think that you can count that rent and you can't, which will change your income, position, or vice versa. Maybe they think that you can't count it, but you can. Those sorts of things I see creep up quite a bit, actually.
And then, Gabe, when you say creep up, something that we haven't touched on is I find this a lot as a real estate agent. I will have a buyer come to me first, or they've already spoken to a lender, which you should do. Speak to the lender first, real estate agent second when you're buying, folks, okay? But they'll talk to the lender, and they might say, you know what? I talked to this other lender, and like Gay's talking about your tax returns, making sure your rental income's there, right? Your spouse has a letter of intent for employment, right? In order to count his or her income. Is that lenders like Gay and Josh and others, they're doing this work up front. You could go to some of the banks that we bank with, right? And they won't do that fact checking early on. Then you get under contract, you're already on an emotional roller coaster because you're PCSing, going to a new area, maybe bought sight unseen, right? And then come to find out right before closing, the rug's pulled out from under you, right? So what Gay is talking about with checking employment and checking how many months you have left on your contract before separation or retirement, this is fact. It's not just make believe. And just because the first lender you spoke to or somebody at the call center or somebody you saw on a third party real estate site online told you, oh no, we don't need that, they will need it too. They're just not going to be able to catch it to the end. And at that time, your family is so vested in it, right? Or you've already spent money on your home inspection, maybe even appraisal. So go back and please fact check and double check and maybe speak to a couple of professionals and make sure their stories light up, because what Josh and Gay are saying is fact. Mm-hmm.
So kind of in a recap, big picture here, what we're talking about, there's challenges and opportunities with PCSing. So we want to make sure we start early, get yourself organized, which includes finding professionals on both sides of the aisle, real estate and mortgage, that are going to help you with that, because that's the only way you're going to be able to maximize this process. Only way you're going to be able to see through all the way. So you're not stuck no matter where you are. You have a house that's not selling and you have you're getting transferred. Like there's nothing that's bad here. There's always options. You want to have pros that will walk you through that. So before we let everyone go tonight, any final parting thoughts for either of you? Gay, you have anything you want to make sure everyone knows in terms of the PCS process?
Gosh, just try as best you can. If you take the advice that we've given you tonight, it will really, really, really help make your process a lot less stressful. Like I said before, there's so many stressors associated with PCSing, and the buying and the selling of a home really doesn't need to be the number one stressor, right? Like put it way down at the bottom of the list. It's unreasonable for me to say that it shouldn't be stressful at all. We all like to, think that we're going to make it not stressful. I don't think that that's possible for it to be not stressful at all, but definitely it shouldn't be at the top of your list, right? With the right team, with the right planning, with the right time, you really, that shouldn't be your number one stressor when it comes to PCSing.
Alexis, your final thoughts?
Take a deep breath. It'll soon be over. There is a classic hurry up and wait game, right? But just try to know that this too shall pass. And also, when there's times where you feel like you're out of control, know that you always have opportunity where you can be in control, right? And what Josh spoke on earlier, I like to say this is like professional dating. Okay, you got to go with your gut first. If there's a red flag, cut them. I mean, off the top, you got to cut them. Okay, go with your gut. No second tries here. Okay, you have a lot on your line. And remember, everybody in the transaction is a stranger. Okay, except for you. So go with your gut, trust your instinct, find people that vibe with you, your conversation level, your availability too. If you're coming from Oconus, we didn't touch on that. Just find people that are going to mesh well with you, and respectfully your spouse too. That's something else too. We didn't talk about that. Who's a POC, who's a point of contact with when it comes to decision making with loans and things like that. But just make sure that there is respect for you and your situation, your family when you're PCSing, and you hire professionals. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, hey, appreciate you guys sharing all of that knowledge and experience. We could literally do like a 2-hour seminar on this. It's that detailed. So if you have questions, go to the Vetted VA map, reach out to a realtor, reach out to a mortgage person. We're happy to walk you through this. Go and join the group. If you're not a member of the Vetted VA Facebook group, you can ask and get answers to any questions you have from all of the vetted pros. But until then, until next week, when we will be back with another set of pros and another topic that applies to you, appreciate you joining us tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. See ya.